Have you ever watched a moment unfold that makes your heart pound and your mind race in disbelief? A moment so raw with tension, injustice, and sheer surprise that you can't tear your eyes away from what's happening. Imagine a warm summer afternoon, bustling city streets, and two cops singling out a quiet black man in a wheelchair. But just as their taunts escalate, something unexpected slips onto the sidewalk, a government ID, not just any ID, but a gleaming Secret Service badge. In the blink of an eye, everything changes, and the ripples of that discovery will take you on one unforgettable journey. It was a muggy day in August, the kind that made the sidewalks shimmer with heat and turned every passing car into a rolling furnace. Most people walked with their heads bent, squinting against the sun, hurrying to get to cooler places. Tourists in T-shirts crowded around the National Mall, snapping pictures of the Washington Monument, while office workers with ID lanyards looped around their necks hustled between towering buildings. Jamal Saunders, a decorated Army veteran and now a Secret Service agent, was making his way down Pennsylvania Avenue in his wheelchair. A tall man, once now the seat of his wheelchair came up to the chest of most pedestrians. He was dressed in simple clothes, dark slacks, a crisp white polo shirt, and sneakers that he had carefully tied that morning. His wheelchair was motorized, but he often kept the power off to remind himself to stay strong through self-propulsion. Though the scorching sun made sweat bead on his forehead, Jamal felt a certain energy coursing through him that day. He was heading to a side office near the White House, a building not open to the general public, to finalize a small assignment related to cybersecurity. The assignment was hush-hush, and only a handful of people knew of his mission. A vital piece of technology had gone missing, and he was the agent tapped to investigate discreetly. The city churned with life around him. Tour buses inched along, loaded with visitors, straining for glimpses of historic landmarks. Stressed-out drivers honked. Street vendors hawked bottled water and pretzels. Jamal tried to keep a low profile, blending into the crowd, but something about him always drew eyes. Maybe the wheelchair, maybe his unwavering posture, or the intense clarity in his gaze that suggested he was always sizing up the environment. Over time, he had learned to deflect curiosity with a calm smile. He had a mission to do, and the last thing he wanted was attention. Passing a small coffee shop named Compass Coffee, Jamal decided to stop in for an iced drink. The cafe was busy, a line wrapping around the counter. Exhausted civil servants and interns waited impatiently to grab their caffeine fixes. Jamal politely queued behind them, conscious of the space his wheelchair took up, trying not to block anyone's path. Eventually, he made it to the front. The barista, a young woman possibly in her early 20s, smiled as if she recognized him. He was a regular in this area after all. They made small talk, but Jamal kept it brief. The day's heat was oppressive, and he needed hydration more than conversation. Just then he heard raised voices outside. Two police officers were standing near the window, scanning the busy sidewalks. The men appeared on edge, their posture tense. One was tall and broad-shouldered with a regulation buzz cut and an evident scowl. The other was shorter, with a thick mustache and arms that bulged beneath his uniform sleeves. They exchanged words that Jamal couldn't make out, but the look in their eyes told him they were searching for someone or something. Instinctively, Jamal felt a prickle of unease. Washington, D.C. had its fair share of law enforcement officers. Capitol Police, Park Police, Metro Police, the Secret Service, FBI, and more. Usually they were professionals, but he knew from personal experience that not all wore the badge with integrity. Gulping his iced coffee, he quietly left the cafe, determined not to draw attention. He quickly checked the time on his phone. He had about 20 minutes until his meeting, and he wasn't going to be late. So he propelled himself down the sidewalk. Jamal barely cleared the cafe door when he realized the officers had locked onto him. They stepped forward aggressively, weaving through the pedestrian traffic. The tall officer called out, "Hey, you with a guttural bark." Jamal paused, tension coiled in his chest. He recognized that voice he had heard, that abrasive edge before, during his days in the military, when certain officers pulled rank just because they could. He looked at the man calmly. "Is there a problem?" "Officer." The shorter one, reading from a notepad, approached. "We're responding to a call of suspicious activity in the area. Someone's been reported loitering around government buildings, asking questions." Jamal, controlling his breathing, replied, "I'm just heading to a meeting, officer. Is there any reason you're stopping me specifically?" The tall officer stepped closer, overshadowing Jamal, and eyed the wheelchair as though it concealed contraband. "You matching the description," that's all he said with a sneer. Matching the description. Jamal had heard that phrase too many times in his life. "Mind telling me the description you have?" he asked, voice measured. The officer rolled his eyes. Black male, suspicious behavior, possibly armed. "That about fit you?" "I'm in a wheelchair," Jamal replied, raising an eyebrow. "How do I fit possibly armed and suspicious?" The policeman's lips curled. "Don't get smart with me. Weapons can be hidden anywhere." Jamal felt the old frustration rising, the remembered ghosts of being stopped and frisked for no reason other than the color of his skin. But he kept his composure. "If you need identification, I can provide it." "Let's see it," the shorter officer said, stepping forward. "But keep your hands where I can see them." In that moment, a handful of pedestrians slowed, watching the exchange. A middle-aged woman with a shopping bag paused. A tourist with a camera seemed ready to film. The tension in the air was palpable. Jamal slipped a hand into the side pocket of his wheelchair bag. Before he could retrieve anything, the tall officer snarled, slowly, as if Jamal were about to pull out a weapon. Jamal complied with excruciating care, but at the last moment his phone rang. The sound startled him, and his grip on his ID lanyard faltered. The officer made a sudden reactive move and slapped Jamal's hand away, causing the ID to slip from his grasp. It tumbled onto the concrete at an odd angle, partially concealed beneath the wheel. Nobody yet realized what it was. "Look, you're making a scene," Jamal said, forcing calm into his voice. "That's my identification. Let me retrieve it." The tall officer's expression was a mask of suspicion. "Hands on your lap," he barked. "We'll do the retrieving." Jamal, swallowing any protest, complied. The shorter officer bent down to pick up the small plastic card. Then his eyes grew wide. He blinked once, then again, disbelieving what he held in his hand. The ID bore Jamal's photograph. Next to the photo in bold lettering were the words, "United States Secret Service." A hush seemed to fall over the immediate circle of bystanders. Jamal remained silent, waiting, watching both officers' faces shift from aggression to confusion, then to a strange mixture of fear and embarrassment. The short policeman glanced at his partner, searching for direction. But the tall officer just stared, the color draining from his cheeks. The Secret Service was no small-time operation. They protected the president, the vice president, and foreign heads of state. They also handled high-level investigations, including counterfeit currency and cybersecurity threats. The tall officer broke the silence first. "I didn't realize. You said you were suspicious." Before he could complete his thought, a wave of whispers spread among the bystanders. A few people pulled out phones to document the scene. One older man with a cane muttered, "Serves 'em right," under his breath. Jamal exhaled a slow breath. He knew this was a moment of reckoning. He could let the officers off easy, or he could make a point about the injustice he had just endured. Memories of past humiliations, even before he was in a wheelchair, flickered through his mind. The time he was stopped for wearing a hoodie in a suburban neighborhood. The time an older gentleman refused him entrance to a building's elevator, telling him he looked dangerous. And now, ironically, even after proving his devotion to serving this country, he was still suspect because of his skin color and his wheelchair. Before we dive deeper into the fallout of this high-voltage confrontation, we must understand Jamal's journey. Born in southeast DC, not too far from the Anacostia River, Jamal grew up in a single-parent household. His mother worked tirelessly 2 jobs at times to provide for him and his younger sister. They lived in a cramped apartment in a tough neighborhood where sirens were the lullaby that ushered in the night. From a young age, Jamal had an unshakable sense of loyalty. Whether it was to his family, his friends, or the ideals he believed in, he followed a moral code that seemed rare for a teenage boy surrounded by hardship. His teachers noticed this streak of responsibility and encouraged him to aim high. When other kids were busy skipping school or hanging on street corners, Jamal was likely in the library absorbing any book he could get his hands on. Yet life in those streets was never a straight path. He witnessed things that nobody should: violent confrontations, drug deals gone wrong, friends taken too soon by a system that seemed to ignore them. But Jamal refused to let his environment define him. At 18, he enlisted in the army, determined to serve his country, to lift himself out of the cycle that trapped so many of his peers. Military life suited him. He soared through basic training, quickly impressing his drill sergeants with his discipline and endurance. Eventually, he found himself deployed in conflict zones, first in Afghanistan, then in Iraq, where he excelled in intelligence operations. It was there he caught the attention of superiors who recommended him for specialized training. One fateful night on a routine patrol, an IED explosion changed his life forever. Jamal survived, but shrapnel tore through his spine. Months of surgeries followed, culminating in the harsh truth he would never walk again. Many might have given up, but not Jamal. He threw himself into rehabilitation at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, pushing his physical limits, forging a resilience even stronger than before. A chance encounter with a Secret Service agent who had served in the Navy and also suffered battle injuries presented Jamal with a new calling. The agent recognized in Jamal a mind adept at pattern recognition, a keen ability to read body language, and most importantly, an unyielding moral core. With that referral, Jamal applied to the Secret Service and was accepted. Though wheelchair-bound, he excelled in intelligence analysis and digital security. Over the years, he'd proven his mettle countless times, thwarting threats from hackers, terrorists, and would-be assassins. He earned the respect of his peers and seniors alike. But none of that mattered on the street corner that day, until his badge made all the difference. Returning to the present moment, the shorter officer clutched Jamal's ID. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words. "Agent Saunders." I didn't know, it's just that we got a call about a suspicious character." Jamal held the officer's gaze, his voice carefully measured. "You assumed I was the suspect because I'm black and in a wheelchair." The taller officer seemed to flinch, then cleared his throat. "We were just doing our job. You fit the description given." Jamal nodded, though his eyes flashed with anger. "I would like my ID back, please." The policeman handed it over almost reverently, like he was touching a holy artifact. Jamal took it and placed it in his wheelchair bag, letting the moment drag. The tension simmered, and the crowd whispered in hushed tones, some capturing every second on their phones. Jamal considered saying nothing more, just leaving them to stew in their embarrassment. But something urged him to speak up. This was a teachable moment for them, and for everyone watching. Officers. He began slowly. I understand. Responding to calls is your job. But the escalation, the immediate assumption of guilt, that's dangerous. I serve this nation as much as anyone, and I've bled in for it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the small gathering of onlookers. The tall officer's face twisted as though struggling between pride and shame. For a moment it seemed he might issue a genuine apology, but instead he spat out, "We were just doing our job again," then turned on his heel and strode away, shouldering through the bystanders. The shorter officer lingered, eyes darting between Jamal and the crowd, then hurried after his partner. In the immediate aftermath, time felt suspended. Pedestrians stared, uncertain whether they should cheer or remain silent. Jamal, still processing the adrenaline pumping through his veins, rolled his shoulders to ease the tension. Then a voice called out, "That was incredible, man. You okay?" A young man in a hoodie stepped forward, phone still recording. Others, emboldened by the tension's break, chimed in with questions and offers of support. Jamal nodded, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, thank you. It's just—" He paused, scanning the faces around him. Many were sympathetic. Some were outraged. A few were merely curious. "It shouldn't have to come to me flashing my badge to be treated with respect," he finally said. A middle-aged woman, perhaps a government worker, clapped her hands. "Good for you," she said quietly. That was some real grace under pressure. Slowly people dispersed, though a few lingered to talk to Jamal, to check if he needed assistance. He politely declined. Taking a deep breath, he focused on his original objective, the meeting. He glanced at his watch. He was going to be late. Despite everything that had happened, duty called. Jamal arrived 15 minutes late, pushing through a nondescript door that led to a corridor lined with bland beige walls. At the end of it was a small locked office that read Department of Treasury, Special Unit. Flipping on the motor for his wheelchair, he navigated the hallway quickly. He swiped his ID at the security checkpoint, ignoring the curious glances from the guard who didn't know him personally. Inside the office, he was greeted by the tired eyes of his colleague and friend, Special Agent Maria DeLuca. She was petite, with wiry strength that belied her stature and eyes that missed nothing. Maria was waiting beside a desk piled high with files. "You're late," she said, trying to sound stern, but concern threaded her voice. "Is everything okay?" Jamal let out a breath, recalling the confrontation. "Had a run-in with a couple of local cops, that's all." Her eyebrows shot up. "You all right? They gave you trouble." Jamal recounted the story in clipped sentences, still bristling with anger. Maria pursed her lips, a muscle jumping in her jaw. "That's unacceptable," she said at last. "I hope you file a complaint." "I might," he said, though he wasn't sure if he would. Sometimes these matters turned into endless bureaucracy that solved nothing. Yet something in his gut told him this was bigger than just one incident. "Anyway," he continued, "what's the status of our case?" Maria sighed, handing him a file. "We've had multiple attempts to breach the encryption on secure government laptops. We suspect someone in the building is either compromised or actively engaged in espionage. We're trying to trace the digital footprints, but it's not easy. We have a partial suspect, someone with high clearance." Jamal skimmed the file. "I'll get on this right away. Keep me updated." Though the job was pressing, Jamal found his thoughts drifting back to those officers. He brushed the memory aside, focusing on the immediate crisis. Hours passed with Jamal and Maria poring over code, analyzing suspicious logins, and cross-referencing employee access logs. They discovered anomalies pointing toward a single IP address with ties to a workstation used by a staff member named Andrew Morris, a mid-level analyst with surprising network privileges. If Morris was involved in illegal activity, it was serious business, possibly even a threat to national security. The next day, Jamal returned determined to corner Andrew Morris discreetly. However, the man called in sick. This raised immediate red flags, either a coincidence or an attempt to dodge detection. Jamal decided to pay a visit to Morris's residence, which was allowed under the circumstances, given the severity of the suspected security breach. Accompanied by Maria and 2 other agents, Jamal arrived at a modest townhouse in Alexandria, Virginia. They knocked, but there was no answer. Despite repeated attempts, the place seemed empty. A neighbor peered out, curious, but offered no meaningful information. Returning to headquarters, Jamal found a message waiting for him. Someone had left a voice recording on the office phone. The voice, unrecognizable, simply stated, "If you value your safety, drop this. We see everything you do." Maria played it twice, her jaw tightening. "They're threatening us," she said flatly, a hint of excitement lighting her eyes. She thrived on challenges like these. Jamal wasn't surprised. High-stakes espionage often came with threats, but he also knew how dangerously real those threats could be. He nodded. "Then we're on the right track. Let's keep digging." Even as Jamal dove deeper into the case, a piece of him kept returning to that episode on the street, the way the officers had singled him out, how the tension had skyrocketed until his ID forced them to see him differently. Something about that moment refused to be ignored. The next evening, he glanced at the Metro Police website. A complaint form waited for him to fill out. He hovered his cursor over it, but hesitated. Part of him wanted to let it go. He had bigger fish to fry with his assignment. Another part felt a deep moral obligation to report the incident. He thought of young men in his neighborhood or across the country who faced worse discrimination without the shield of a Secret Service badge. For them, justice seldom came. He printed out the form, deciding he would fill it by hand and mail it, a process he found oddly more personal and deliberate. Setting it aside, he returned to the cryptic data from the Morris case. After 3 sleepless nights, Jamal found the breakthrough he'd been seeking. A flurry of encrypted messages had been sent through an internal channel, apparently masked by a sophisticated program. Tracing them took every ounce of his coding ability, but at last he pinpointed a physical address connected to the transmissions. It was an abandoned warehouse near the Potomac River. That location ironically used to be a government surplus storage facility decades ago. Suspecting this was where Morris, or whoever was behind the infiltration, was operating, Jamal and Maria prepared an off-the-books recon mission. They alerted their superiors, but an official raid would require more time and paperwork. Time they feared might alert the suspect, so they opted for a quick, low-profile approach. It wasn't entirely regulation, but the sense of urgency was real. Around midnight, they parked a nondescript SUV a few blocks away from the warehouse. Jamal, checking the battery on his wheelchair, felt the old pang of frustration. Stealth missions were trickier in a wheelchair. But he also knew he had the element of surprise. Most criminals wouldn't expect a wheelchair-bound agent to be the one closing in. With Maria beside him, Jamal made his way through the deserted streets, the rumble of distant traffic echoing off the empty buildings. Flickering streetlights cast long shadows. Finally, they reached a tall chain-link fence surrounding the warehouse compound. The gate was locked, but they found a spot where the fence had been cut and rusted away. As they slipped through, Jamal's heart pounded. Even though he was physically at a disadvantage, he'd trained meticulously in firearms and situational awareness. He had a concealed pistol strapped under his wheelchair seat, well within reach. Maria led the way, scanning with a small flashlight. The warehouse door was padlocked, yet strangely it was already broken, the lock severed. They exchanged cautious glances. Inside, the air was thick with dust and stale oil. Broken crates lined the walls, and old machinery stood in corners like slumbering beasts. A faint light glowed at the far end of the cavernous space. Near it, they could make out a makeshift workstation with computers and cables snaking across the concrete floor. Silhouetted in the haze was a man hunched over a screen. Jamal recognized him at once, Andrew Morris. They approached quietly. Jamal's wheelchair moved with a faint whir, but the ambient noise, dripping pipes, humming electrical boxes, covered it well enough. Morris was engrossed in his task, typing feverishly. He looked disheveled, as though he'd been holed up for days. Maria shot Jamal a questioning glance, and he nodded ready. She cleared her throat. "Andrew Morris, Secret Service. Step away from the computer with your hands visible." Morris jumped, nearly toppling his chair. His eyes darted from Maria to Jamal's wheelchair, confusion etched in his features. For a moment, he seemed to consider running, but there was nowhere to go except deeper into the echoing corridors. Instead, he raised his hands, palms out. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "Really?" "Because it looks like you're hacking into government systems," Maria said sternly, drawing her weapon in a non-verbal threat. Jamal also drew his pistol, aiming steadily. "Now step away from the console." Morris complied, stumbling over his own feet. Jamal edged closer, scanning the monitors. "Sending data to an unknown server, forging login credentials, infiltration attempts on sensitive networks," he read out loud. "Looks like espionage to me." "Listen, I had no choice," Morris cried, fear crackling in his voice. "They threatened my family. There's a group dangerous people. They forced me." "Who are they?" Maria demanded. "Not sure. Some hidden organization," Morris whimpered. "They wanted classified data on the president's schedule, advanced encryption codes from Treasury. I told them I couldn't do it, but they showed me pictures of my wife, my daughter. They said they'd kill them if I didn't comply." Morris's desperate tone felt genuine, and Jamal's instincts told him there was more here than met the eye. Maria relaxed her aim slightly. "Where's your family now? I sent them to a relative in Delaware," Morris said, trembling. "I'm supposed to deliver the final codes tonight." Jamal exchanged a look with Maria. This was bigger than they'd anticipated. If a powerful organization was coercing government analysts, national security was at grave risk. They needed immediate backup and protective custody for Morris and his family. But as Jamal reached for his phone to call for reinforcements, a sudden noise echoed in the warehouse, a clang that reverberated like a gunshot in the empty space. Adrenaline surged. Jamal and Maria wheeled and turned, scanning the shadows. Morris froze wide-eyed. Suddenly, bright beams of light flooded in from the high windows. The distinct metallic click of guns being cocked echoed around them. Several figures in black tactical gear appeared at the perimeter, moving swiftly. At least half a dozen, possibly more. A voice boomed from the darkness. "Hands on your heads, or we open fire." The accent was indiscernible, possibly altered with a voice modulator. The silhouettes had no visible identifying marks. Maria and Jamal exchanged a quick glance. Outnumbered, outgunned. The darkness pressed in, amplifying the tension. Morris let out a whimper, sinking to his knees. Jamal weighed the odds. A firefight in a cramped space with multiple hostiles was suicidal. A dozen scenarios rushed through his mind in seconds. Then he made a choice. He eased his weapon to the floor, raising his hands. Maria followed suit. They were forced to watch as the masked operatives rushed in, controlling the area with practiced efficiency. One stepped forward, the apparent leader. He motioned for another to seize the computers. Others kept their guns trained on Jamal, Maria, and Morris. The intruders swiftly disconnected cables, stashing the computers into rugged cases. Throughout it all, they maintained a tight formation, betraying advanced training. "Please, Morris pleaded. I did what you asked. I got the codes. Leave my family alone." The leader said nothing, only nodded to one of his subordinates, who whipped out a pistol and shot Morris in the leg. The sound thundered, and Morris crumpled with a scream, clutching his thigh. The entire sequence unfolded in less than 2 seconds, too fast for anyone to react. "No," Jamal roared, heart thundering. He reached for his wheelchair's hidden compartment, but a rifle butt slammed into his shoulder, knocking him sideways. He gasped in pain, muscles tightening with the impact. Maria tried to help, only to be struck with a blow to her ribs by another operative. The men in black exuded a terrifying calm, methodical in their violence. With the computers secured, the leader turned to the pinned agents. Jamal met his gaze, icy eyes behind a black mask. The leader's voice emerged cold and distorted. "You agents have no idea what you've stumbled into. Don't interfere again." Then, with a swift motion, he raised his weapon, aiming at Jamal. Everything slowed. Jamal tensed, expecting a fatal shot. But at the last second, the leader seemed to reconsider his gaze, flicking to the Secret Service ID that had spilled onto the floor in the chaos. "Killing a Secret Service agent might bring too much heat," he muttered almost to himself. "We have what we need. Move out." In a matter of seconds, the squad vanished. Their black SUVs squealed away, leaving Jamal, Maria, and the wounded Morris in a swirl of dust and confusion. Silence returned, thick with shock. Jamal forced his mind to function through the pain in his shoulder. His adrenaline still spiked, but he noted Morris's critical state. Blood soaked the man's pant leg. "We need an ambulance," Jamal rasped. Maria fumbled for her phone, hands trembling, and dialed 911. In minutes, sirens wailed through the deserted streets. Police cruisers, paramedics, and eventually federal backup swarmed the warehouse. Morris was loaded onto a stretcher, delirious but alive. As paramedics administered first aid, he clutched Jamal's hand. "Protect my family. Please," he breathed. Jamal nodded solemnly, ignoring the tears threatening to blur his vision. "We'll do everything we can," he promised. Then Morris's eyes fluttered shut as the paramedics carried him away. In the background, the local police began swarming the crime scene. Jamal felt a pang of dread recalling the fiasco from days earlier. Would these cops be more helpful or just as dismissive? He glanced at Maria, who still clutched her side, wincing. Their faces mirrored disbelief at how the mission had spiraled out of control. Before they could regroup, a grim-faced DC detective approached, wanting statements. Jamal swallowed his resentment toward local law enforcement. This was bigger than any personal slight. They needed all hands on deck to figure out who these masked operatives were. The detective seemed professional, jotting down every detail Jamal and Maria shared. He didn't appear to harbor the same prejudice Jamal had encountered earlier. As dawn broke over the Potomac, coloring the sky in soft pink hues, Jamal finally left the warehouse behind, uncertain about the future of this case, or how deep the conspiracy ran. By noon, the entire fiasco had leaked to the press. Secret Service agents attacked. In late-night sting blared the headlines. Speculation ran wild. Some pinned it on domestic terrorists, others on foreign spies. Cable news outlets looped the same grainy footage from reporters who arrived too late to catch the action, but just in time to feed the frenzy. As Jamal returned to the office for a debrief, he saw a wave of texts and missed calls from friends and acquaintances. Word had spread. Among the messages, one caught his eye. It was from a local civil rights group, referencing the incident with the Metro Police that had gone viral on social media. Somebody had uploaded the video of Jamal's confrontation with those officers. The clip titled, "Cops Harass Black Man in Wheelchair Regret It When They See His ID," had garnered thousands of views overnight. People were outraged and intrigued, demanding accountability. Between the high-stakes espionage and the public outcry over police harassment, Jamal felt like he was being pulled in two directions. One part of him wanted to bury himself in the case, to unravel the mysterious group behind the warehouse ambush. The other felt compelled to address the growing conversation around police discrimination. A part of him realized that if his story could spark change, perhaps it was his responsibility to help guide that conversation. That afternoon, Jamal was called to a high-level meeting with the director of the Secret Service, William Harlow, an imposing figure with a stern demeanor, known for his unwavering commitment to the agency. Maria, still nursing bruised ribs, accompanied him. In the director's spacious office, the hush was oppressive. Harlow sat behind a mahogany desk flanked by portraits of past presidents. "Agent Saunders, Agent DeLuca," he began, voice gruff. "I've been briefed on the warehouse incident. Very concerning. We believe a highly organized faction, possibly with foreign sponsorship, is targeting our security systems. Your confrontation at the warehouse confirms they'll stop at nothing. The question is, how do we proceed?" Maria cleared her throat. "Sir, we believe Andrew Morris is the key. He claims he was coerced. If we protect him and his family, he might cooperate fully. He could identify the group that attacked us." Harlow nodded. "We have Morris in a secure medical facility, under guard. He's stable but heavily sedated. We'll move his family into witness protection. Meanwhile, we're coordinating with the FBI and CIA. This threat is beyond our typical scope." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Sir, with all due respect, we need to move fast. They already have partial infiltration codes. Who knows what else they've stolen?" Harlow pursed his lips. "I agree. For the moment, you two remain on the lead for this. But I must address another matter, Agent Saunders." He folded his hands. "There's a viral video of you with the Metro Police." Jamal braced himself, feeling a spike of anxiety. "Yes, sir." Harlow exhaled, tapping a pen on his desk. "The public is outraged at how you were treated. Our Office of Public Affairs is also receiving calls. We want to ensure your well-being. There's talk of you pressing charges, calling for disciplinary action against the officers. The President's team is aware, too. This can't be ignored." Maria glanced at Jamal, her eyes urging him to speak up. Jamal felt a swirl of emotions. "Sir, I didn't seek the spotlight. But yes, it happened. I'm deciding whether to file a formal complaint." Harlow nodded. "This agency respects your rights as a citizen and an agent. Just be aware that how you handle this could have wider repercussions. We're dealing with a heated climate. The president may address police reform soon, and your case could become a lightning rod. Jamal let out a slow breath. Understood. But my first priority is this investigation. Harlow's features softened slightly. Good. Then go. Do what you do best. He paused, looking Jamal in the eye. And Agent Saunders, stay safe. This is bigger than either of us. Over the next several days, Jamal and Maria dug deeper into the labyrinth of leads. They interviewed Morris once he was coherent, gleaning that the black-clad attackers might be linked to a global network seeking to destabilize the US from within. Their aim: compromise key government infrastructure, incite public distrust, and possibly orchestrate a catastrophic cyber attack. In the midst of this, Jamal received an unexpected call from a local reporter named Diane Thomas with the Washington Post. She sought an exclusive interview about the confrontation with Metro Police, hoping to highlight the broader context of racial profiling in law enforcement. She approached Jamal politely, stressing the importance of giving voice to systemic issues. Initially, Jamal hesitated. He'd never wanted to become a poster child for anything. But recent events, combined with the flood of online support and personal stories of others who had faced discrimination, began to weigh on him. He recalled how many times he'd felt invisible or singled out unjustly. Now he possessed the credibility and platform to push for change. He agreed on the condition that the interview also highlight the resilience of veterans and disabled individuals, particularly those who continue to serve. Diane readily agreed. They arranged to meet at a small park in the city. Jamal insisted it be a public space, partly for transparency, partly for his own sense of control. The day of the interview dawned clear and cooler. Seated on a bench at the park, Jamal waited as Diane approached with a camera crew. She greeted him warmly, placing a hand on his wheelchair. Agent Saunders. Thank you for doing this. It means a lot. Jamal nodded, glancing around at the bustling park. I'm not seeking fame, but if telling my story can help, I'm willing. Diane's questions were poised and respectful. She asked about his background, his time in the military, how he ended up in a wheelchair, and finally the run-in with the police. Jamal recounted the event, carefully emphasizing that not all officers are bad, but the system often encourages snap judgments. He made a point to mention how quickly perceptions changed once his Secret Service ID was revealed. It makes me wonder, he said softly, what about those who don't have an ID that commands respect? They might get arrested or worse for nothing more than looking suspicious. Diane pressed him gently about the emotional toll. Jamal admitted it weighed on him, that it reopened old wounds. But I can't let bitterness consume me, he concluded. I believe in our institutions. I serve them. I just want to see them uphold justice for everyone, not just for those with badges. The interview ended on a hopeful note. Diane seemed moved. I think your words will resonate with many people, Agent Saunders, she said. Thank you. A few evenings later, Jamal received a call from the Metro Police Department's Internal Affairs Office. The viral video had triggered an investigation. The two officers who harassed him were summoned to a disciplinary hearing with potential sanctions or termination on the line. Jamal was invited to give a statement if he wished. Even as he prepped for the hearing, the investigation into the masked operatives continued to intensify. More evidence emerged of a planned major cyber attack. Tensions within the Secret Service soared as they coordinated with intelligence agencies. Every piece of data suggested an imminent crisis. Some rumored it could be timed to disrupt an upcoming presidential event. One day, returning late from a briefing, Jamal cruised along the quiet streets in his wheelchair, having chosen to wheel himself home for the exercise. He took a shortcut down a side alley, an old route from his youth near where he grew up. Suddenly, two shapes emerged from behind a dumpster. Flashlights blazed. He tensed, thinking it might be more masked operatives. Instead, he recognized the faces of the same two Metro officers who harassed him days before. They looked tense, cornered somehow. "You again," Jamal muttered under his breath, freezing in place. The tall officer looked disheveled, the short one equally uneasy. Saunders, the tall officer, began an odd tremor in his voice. "We need to talk." Jamal's instincts screamed caution. "It's late," he said warily. "I doubt we have much to discuss." The shorter officer stepped forward, regret flickering in his eyes. "We messed up. We were wrong about you. But that's not why we're here. It's about our precinct. We've overheard things. Corruption runs deep. Some top officials are trying to bury complaints, including yours. They're intimidating witnesses." Jamal raised an eyebrow, scanning their faces for signs of duplicity. "Why tell me this?" The tall officer swallowed tension etched on his features. "Because we're facing suspension or worse. Maybe we deserve it. But we also know that the corruption inside the force links to bigger fish. There's talk about a group that's infiltrated local law enforcement, possibly the same group you're after." Jamal's heart kicked. "Are you sure?" The officer nodded, glancing around as if he feared being watched. "Yeah. We overheard a conversation, something about a major event, a takedown of government systems. They're paying off certain cops to keep quiet, to stay out of certain areas when something goes down." A swirl of possibility struck Jamal. Could it be that the infiltration extended to local police that might explain the ease with which the masked operatives maneuvered around the city? The shorter officer sighed. "We want to come clean, help you if we can. We messed up with you, but we're not traitors. This is bigger than us." For a moment, Jamal stayed silent, anger and caution wrestling within him. He remembered the humiliating scene, but he also recognized they might hold valuable information. "Then let's work together," he said finally. "You give me everything you've got. Let's see if we can stop whatever's coming." The officers exhaled relief, mingling with lingering shame. "Thank you," the tall one said quietly. "We know we owe you an apology." "And more." Jamal managed a nod. "One step at a time. Let's get the job done first." In the days that followed, the two police officers met clandestinely with Jamal and Maria, revealing details about suspicious meetings at certain precincts, hush money, exchanging hands and anonymous instructions to stand down on a specific date. They also implicated a high-ranking local official rumored to be on the payroll of the same shadowy organization that threatened Andrew Morris. Cross-referencing the evidence, Jamal realized the date in question aligned with a major public address by the president at the Lincoln Memorial. If the conspirators disabled key security systems, the president would be vulnerable and panic could ensue. Under Jamal's guidance, the Secret Service ramped up protective measures, installing backup systems, reassigning trusted personnel, and coordinating with local law enforcement agencies that were vetted. The suspicious officials quietly found themselves reassigned or placed on leave as internal probes commenced. The network that had planned a grand-scale infiltration found itself facing unexpected resistance from within. The day of the president's address arrived. Thousands gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. The sky was a brilliant blue, flags rustled in a gentle breeze, and the atmosphere brimmed with patriotic pride. Jamal was stationed in a secure command center, with Maria monitoring feeds from drones and cameras. Additional Secret Service agents swarmed the perimeter. All was calm until about halfway through the president's speech. Suddenly, multiple systems flickered, glitching in and out. "They're launching a cyber attack," Maria yelled, scanning the monitors. Alarms beeped. In a matter of seconds, entire networks began to fail. Cameras blinked offline. Communications grew patchy. Yet Jamal had planned redundancies, implementing a hidden backup. He swiftly rerouted the feeds, restoring partial visibility. The glitch had thrown the attackers off guard. They likely expected a total blackout. Instead, the system began to adapt, forcing them to escalate. Intel indicated a group of heavily armed men had crossed a restricted zone, heading toward the president's vantage point. "Send teams to intercept Jamal," barked into a radio. He could see the real-time movement on an auxiliary feed. Tactical squads positioned themselves, cutting off the approach. A flurry of gunfire erupted, muted through the command center's walls, but visible on the monitors. The masked assailants bore the same gear as the warehouse attackers. Within minutes, Secret Service and specialized DC SWAT units overpowered them. None escaped this time. Back in the command center, cheers erupted as each attacker was secured. Jamal rubbed his eyes, relief flooding him. The president's speech continued, barely disrupted in the eyes of the public. Many watching from home remained unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. In the aftermath, the media buzzed with reports of a foiled terror plot, praising the swift action of law enforcement and the Secret Service. Jamal's role became a point of interest, especially when footage of him directing the operation from his wheelchair circulated. The narrative quickly shifted to highlight his unwavering bravery, both as a black disabled veteran and a top-tier federal agent. Meanwhile, the internal affairs hearing for the 2 Metro officers proceeded. They faced reprimands for their initial harassment of Jamal, but their cooperative actions in exposing the bigger conspiracy weighed in their favor. Ultimately, the department handed them suspensions and mandatory retraining rather than outright dismissal. Jamal's statement struck a balance. He didn't demand their careers end, but he made it clear that accountability was necessary. The highest-ranking official revealed in the local corruption scandal was indicted awaiting trial. Andrew Morris and his family entered witness protection with the full backing of the Secret Service. The masked group, now partially unmasked, saw their infiltration attempts globally crippled by intelligence agencies once their methods were exposed. For Jamal, a bittersweet sense of triumph filled him. He had prevented a catastrophe. He had also brought attention to systemic discrimination. The city was buzzing about needed reforms. Politicians took note. In many ways, it felt like the beginning of deeper change rather than an end. 1 month later, Jamal found himself in front of a large crowd again, but this time it was in a community hall in Anacostia, not far from where he grew up. He was invited to speak at a town hall addressing police relations and community trust. Mothers, fathers, teens, pastors, and local officers filled at the seats. The mayor was there, along with several city council members. Wheeling himself to the makeshift podium, Jamal scanned the crowd. He saw weariness, anger, hope. He cleared his throat. "I stand before you today, not just as an agent of the Secret Service, but as a native of these streets. I stand as someone who's faced struggles, racial bias, disability, suspicion. And yet I also stand as someone who believes we can do better." He spoke about his experiences, the importance of accountability, and the need for empathy on both sides, police and community. He emphasized that trust wasn't a given. It was earned through consistent fairness and respect. By the time he finished, the crowd was on its feet, applause echoing in the hall. Backstage, the two officers who had once harassed him approached timidly. They were there for the dialogue, looking profoundly changed by recent events. "Thank you for giving us a chance to do the right thing," the shorter one said. The taller officer merely nodded, his expression contrite. Jamal shook their hands. "It's never too late to grow," he replied simply. Life didn't slow down after the chaos. It simply shifted into a different rhythm. Jamal Saunders returned to his work at the Secret Service with the same quiet intensity that had always defined him, though something in his mission had deepened. He wasn't just chasing cyber criminals anymore. He was pushing back against systems that overlooked or undermined people like him. Every keystroke in an investigation, every classified memo he read, now carried a greater weight. But Jamal's role wasn't confined to the agency. More and more, he was called upon as a speaker, an advocate, a symbol of resilience. He accepted the responsibility not for fame or applause, but because he had seen firsthand what could happen when people stayed silent. His inbox began to fill with letters, some from young veterans, some from kids in rough neighborhoods, others from wheelchair users who had felt invisible until they saw his story. Each message reminded him representation matters. Still, he made time for peace. In the evenings, he'd roll to his balcony overlooking the layered lights of Washington, D.C. Some nights he watched the chaos of the city. Others he just listened to the hum of distant traffic. And always that moment on the sidewalk lingered in his memory, the sound of his ID hitting the pavement, the sudden stillness of a crowd realizing the truth. It had been humiliating, yes, but it had also cracked something open, and through that fracture, a flood of reckoning had begun. He didn't hold on to bitterness. The two officers who had once treated him with contempt had made strides to do better. And Jamal, despite everything, believed in change, real change. Change built not from viral videos or forced apologies, but from hard conversations, persistent advocacy and action. He kept moving the motor on his chair, humming softly as he wheeled into briefings, community forums, or late-night surveillance reviews. The wheel quite literally kept turning. He couldn't walk. But he had never stopped moving forward. What began as a harrowing instance of racial profiling on a bustling city street ended in a dramatic tale of conspiracy, redemption, and courage that changed countless lives. Jamal Saunders, the wheelchair-bound Secret Service agent, didn't just thwart a global threat. He also shone a glaring spotlight on the everyday injustices that plague communities across the nation. His story reminds us that standing up for one's rights isn't only about protecting yourself. It's about defending the dignity and safety of others who can't always fight back. Jamal's perseverance and moral resolve sparked conversations that could lead to real, lasting change. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with a friend who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that highlight bravery, justice, and hope. Together we can help spread the lessons of Jamal's journey far and wide.